Hello and welcome. My name is Dave Bode for Tuts Plus, and in this tutorial we're going to be checking out a sample library from the good folks at SOUNDIRON called Voices of Rapture, the Soprano. What we're looking at here is Kontakt. This is a Kontakt library, and it's a solo soprano library. This was recorded with soprano virtuoso Nicole Deschênes in a very dry studio. So we're going to check this out and we're going to take a look at a few examples that use this to help expand your creativity when you're making some music. Now, this is not a Kontakt powered library, so it's not going to show up in your library's panel of Kontakt. This is a download product, so you're going to get it, you're going to download it, and then you're going to put it wherever you need to. For my case, I have a special drive that I put all my samples on. It makes it just easy to organize. And so when we drill in here, this is the main folder. We have an instruments folder. We jump in here, we have Kontakt 4 patches, and then we have Kontakt 5 patches. And then in here, you can see kind of the main set of patches. We have legato ah and oo. Then we have a legato ah and a legato oo. We have some phrases in French, phrases in Latin. We have some phrase vowels, phrase whistles, polystaccatos, polysustains, sustains, and vocal effects. We're going to take a look at a few of these. We're not going to check out all of them. Then we have a folder called Ambiences, and we'll check out that a little bit later. Then we have a light version, which these are a little bit less memory and CPU intensive. Then we have a collection of phrase synced and stretchable patches here. So what I have loaded up is the legato ah and oo patch. I'm going to bump up the volume just a hair here. So this gives you two legato sustained patches. We have an oo on a quieter dynamic, so it doesn't have vibrato. It's very pretty, and there are real legato transitions in here. And you can see there's a waveform viewer here. And if I just press a key without previously pressing a key and connecting it, we will hear just a normal attack to the note. Now, if I transition from one note to another, we can see that it starts this oo right here, because this first part here is the actual transition, which offers a good bit of variety and a lot of realism there, which is very cool. So you can see there's a bunch of controls over here, and by default, the mod wheel here is mapped to swell. Then we have pretty standard things. We have attack and release. Then we have offset. Now what this will do is this basically pushes where the start point is for the samples, which we're going to talk more about later in this tutorial when we check out some of the phrases. Then we have a speed dial here. Then we have an intensity knob. Now this has to do with the intensity of the legato transition. So if we turn this down, it's going to make the transitional area a little bit quieter. And this can be useful for kind of fine tuning the legato transitions a little bit, because you'll find that some of them are a little bit jumpy and they're not quite as subtle as some of the other ones. Then we have voices. Now we can do polyphony here, but we're going to need to modify the range dial here. By default, it's set to 24, which is 24 semitones, and that's 2 octaves. And you can see we can barely, if we look at the key range here, we can barely get that. Most of the time, you're probably going to be using this monophonically, and that's totally fine as well. Now, way down here, we have a couple of key switches, and these are to set it between the ah and the oo. And if you don't like them there, say you want them down here, we can set them right here, just with that set button there. Now they're a little bit closer if you're using a smaller keyboard. And then we have the ah vowels. Now, these are another legato transition instrument patch here. Very beautiful sounding, and you can hear that there is some reverb on there. If we jump over here to the effects rack, and we have some mods, some dynamics, some drive, amp, cabinet, EQ, delay, with some nice looking GUIs on there. And by default, I believe all the patches come with a little bit of reverb on there. And they include a whole bunch of custom impulses that you can load up here and other things as well. But by default, that's on. And if you want to route reverb differently, you can turn this off and then do so at your will. So if we jump over here to the high quality, we'll load up a couple different patches here so you can hear what's going on. These are the phrases in French. Now, if you look in their manual, you will see this is based on a French poem. There's a whole bunch of different phrases in here. Some of these keys have a different key range, so there are more phrases, and some of them there are less phrases in. Now, these keys here are kind of generalizations. This isn't like all of these are in B minor or B major. Some of them in this set may be in B major, and some of them may be in B minor, some of them may be in B Phrygian. So it's kind of a little bit of seeing what there is here and then deciding what you want to use. Now, you don't have to use the whole phrase. So, for instance, we have this start offset here. And so what we can do is we can automate this, and then as we play a note, we can push this around. And so now, if we find a part of this that we like, we can get a lot more flexibility out of it. Now, the words in the poems are not going to make any sense if we do that, because we'll be splitting words and the actual meaning of the phrases is going to kind of fall apart. But I'm not sure that's too critical. Now, moving on here, we have a crossfade between the phrases. This will kind of crossfade them together, as opposed to, if we push this over, we can hear that better. As opposed to something like this, which does a little bitty crossfade in between rather than just nailing the next phrase at wherever the start point is. Now, usually at the beginning of these, there's a little phrasey kind of swell, so that's not really going to matter too much if you're firing all the phrases from the beginning, but if you're pushing around the start point, that will make a difference in how they connect to one another. We also have a pitch here. We can kind of pitch these up. And then we have a stretch function here. Now, right now it's set to sync, but we can put this on free. And we can stretch that a little bit. Now, obviously, that was a little bit ridiculous. But we're going to look at an example where I use the stretching and some of these phrases to craft a very pretty line. Now, Latin phrases are very similar, except they're in Latin. And we have some phrase vowels here. So these are little phrases. With just some open vowels, which is very cool. Then we have some whistle phrases. We have some polystaccatos. And then right here we have the list of different things that we can load up here. And we can key switch these. You can see down here, we can jump between these. Not all of these are perfectly synced up, so adds a little bit of realism if you like, or you can adjust the timings of the notes in your sequencer to make those line up just right. Then we have some polysustains. So you can use these to create a lot of really enchanting ambiences and textures. Now you can hear if we turn on the legato, what it'll do is it keeps moving this phrase, if you will, along, and then synthetically legato transitions from phrase to phrase. So basically it's kind of doing a crossfade between those until we turn the intensity up. And then you can hear that little pitch bending happening in there. And these are stretchable as well in the high quality. I don't believe that the normal patch, you can stretch them, but if we jump into the high quality folder, we can stretch these out or set them to tempo sync. Then we also have some sustains. Now these are just vowels, and so we have with and without vibrato, we have e with and without, we have with vibrato, oo no vibrato, wa with and without, and yay with and without. And then we have a whole host of vocal effects as well.
Je vois qu'agneau de Dieu, Dieu.
And then we jump over to the ambiences. So these are using the same vocal samples, but they've been mangled and manipulated to create some really cool sounding ambiences. Really, really richly textured. And for each one of these patches, there are a number of sub patches, if you will, which are also, if we go way down here, are key switchable. Here you can see C -2 through F sharp -2. And you can play with the attack and release of these. Some of them are more ambient and some of them are more musical. These ones, these are kind of vocoded. A lot of interesting stuff there. So let's check out some examples here. Right here, we're looking at Reaper, and I have a really short, very simple example. Let me play it down for you, and then we'll jump in and check out what's going on. So to create this, I'm essentially using 4 patches. Actually, it's just 3 patches. Most of what you're hearing comes from the Latin A phrases, and we can look at what that looks like. Now, I'm not using any Kontakt instances with multiple instrument patches loaded in them, although you could. It's just, this is how I built this project. So let's look at the MIDI for this, because this is what drives most of it. What we have here are the MIDI notes. Now, these are not triggering anything that has any relevant note data. These are just triggering different phrases like we looked at a second ago. Down here, we have some other inputs here that are controlling where the phrase starts and how fast it plays. We have mod wheel here. Now that's controlling the amplitude or the volume that the phrases get played back. Now that's not actually switching any internal dynamics, but it's controlling the general volume there, and that's fine. Then I've used CC12 to control the sample start or the phrase start. So if we pull up that one right there, you can see. So just that much, you can see what's going on there. In each one of these phrases, right before the phrase starts, CC12 is telling it right where to start. Now, to audition these, and the way that I built this is I use a Korg Nano Control MIDI controller when I'm writing and programming these things. And so what I did was I assigned the offset to CC12, which I have as a knob on the controller. And so as I'm playing these, so say I just want it to start right here, just turn the knob. Or maybe here. Now I also set, if you see here, I set CC2, which is breath controller, to control the speed at which they get played back. And so most of the time, if we look here, it sits right in the middle here, and the value is 64. But at the end of some of the phrases, I need to kind of stretch them out a little bit. So I will automate that down. And then some of them need to be sped up like this here. 64 is right here along this middle line. Now this phrase right here, you can see the start position is starting the phrase right at the beginning, but I needed to kind of stretch it out. So I kind of pulled that down just a little bit and then ramped it up at the end so that it didn't get to the next part of the phrase and have some weird syllable junk hanging over before the next note or the next phrase. And so basically I just kind of strung those together to create something here. And I was pretty happy with it. Now, within this one patch and within this sub patch of the key of A, as it says, which this is not actually the key of A, this is in the key of D major. Within this one patch, I couldn't find all of the things that I was looking for. So I had to supplement the end of the phrases with some ahs and oohs, and you can see that here. This is that ah legato, ah ooh legato patch that we looked at just a minute ago. So we have this phrase here, blah, 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 and then it goes right into this ah vowel here with the vibrato. And then I used another ah patch here. This time it's a different one. This is from the Sustain collection. And the reason why I used this as opposed to the other ah, which is contained in the legato patch, is because the vibrato on this and this particular note was a little slower. I felt that that was more appropriate here. And then the last one, it does a key switch back to ooh, and then we just have an ooh vowel for the end. Now some of these notes in here and in this collection are what I like to call pitchy. And that is a term that I use for being not exactly perfectly 100% in tune. So you can see that what I've done to correct for that. So we have this one, which is, and then, so this particular pitch is probably a quarter step flat. And so some of them need to be corrected. And the easiest way to do that for me is using the pitch bend wheel, because you have a lot of very finite control. So even within a phrase, you can adjust the pitch to make it be exactly where you want it to. And because it's very smooth and the Kontakt has a very smooth pitching algorithm, you can get a lot of control over that. Now, it can be tricky when you're looking at a patch like this here with the Latin phrases, because there are 100 or so or more phrases to sort through. And auditioning them one, by the time you get to here, you'll have no idea what these first ones actually sound like. One way that I dealt with that is I set up another project where I basically just transcribed all of the phrases in one particular patch. And I'll show you how I did that really quick. So what I did was I created just a chromatic MIDI track here. Basically just hits all the notes chromatically. So we're going to fire each one of these phrases, and each one of them, I was guessing, is not more than about 5 measures long at 90 beats per minute. And that's where we are here. So I had this MIDI track basically play back these. Then what I did was I used a plugin called Retune, and this is a stock plugin that comes with Reaper. And what I did was I checked send MIDI events when pitch changes. And so what this is going to do is, just like a regular tuner, this is going to analyze the audio and it's going to say what note it is, but it's going to send that note change information out on MIDI. Then I created another track, which is right here. If we look at the I/O, this is receiving from track 1, Voices of Rapture, phrases Latin A, and it's receiving the MIDI. So the MIDI is being sent to here. And then in the record options, I have it recording the output MIDI. And so if I record enable this and I play,
Ave Maria, gratia plena.
basically what that's going to do for me is that's going to automate the transcription process. Now, unfortunately, what happens is there's a good bit of junk here because, the human voice is not perfect. And so there are little pitch bends and the attacks frequently are not exactly on the pitch. And when you are singing legato and you transition between notes, it sweeps across these passing tones here between this A and this C. And so it's going to record all those, even though you may not want it to. Also, what I did is I used some auto-tune. I used an auto-tune here, which you see is off, and then I used another auto-tune that's built into this Retune plugin here, because without this, if I turn off all of the pitch correction, it's not actually called auto-tune, it's called automatic pitch correction, and then I record, and we look at this, we're going to have a lot more variation here. Every time she does vibrato, the pitch is going to bend and it's going to record that. And so that's going to make this pretty daunting to go through. And the reason why I did this is now what I can do is I can take these 2 MIDI tracks here, I can go into File and export them, and I can save the MIDI track information. And so later, if we look in this project here, I have all of the phrases after I've cleaned them up on another track here so that I can look at them and say, well, I really want something that goes from a B to a C sharp. So I can look over here in the keyboard and I can select B, and then I can kind of scan very quickly and see where the transitions are between B and C sharp, if there are any in here, which there are some, and there's no long kind of transitions, but there are several. Say maybe I need a B to an A, and there are several to choose from. So right here, so now I have a way to essentially get visual feedback of what's happening in these phrases, which is very, very helpful for building out lines and using it in a musical way where you're not just kind of wading through 150 phrases. By that little technique there of running the autotune, and the reason why I stacked 2 autotunes in there is to really, really hammer the tuning to combat some of the vibrato and some of the extra pitchiness. And I kind of listened to maybe a dozen of them and determined that most of them in this preset here that says that it's in A, the key of A, most of them sounded to me like they were in the key of D major. So I set my pitch correction to only look at those notes. Otherwise, it wouldn't be doing much more than not using pitch correction at all. It would kind of hold some of the notes in a little bit better. But if you can determine where the notes are, it has a much better chance of trying to correct them. Now that obviously sounds horrible, but it's going to slam the notes right down and hold them on the pitch as much as possible, which for automating this transcription was a lot easier. I'll just record this. Now that obviously sounds ridiculous, but when we look in here, you can see there's a lot less junk than there was previously. I'll glue these together here so you can see. If we look over here, we can see this is without the pitch correction. You can see there's a lot more stuff we have to clean up. And even with just the one pitch corrector, there is still some garbage to clean up. But if we look at this third example here, there's a lot less garbage to clean up. So now we can jump, there's definitely not an octave shift there. That note's probably not there. These notes definitely not there. These in-between notes, that right there is pretty close. And we'll take off their pitch correctors and you'll see that it's pretty close. And what you're looking at down here is I basically put another instrument down here so that I could check to see how close these were. Because what I wanted to do was I wanted to map all of the notes so that I could have access to them in a much more usable way, at least for my workflow and the way my brain works. I wanted a way to be able to check. So after I recorded them all, I cleaned them all up, then I dragged them down here to this other instrument. And because the Retune plugin has a bit of time window that it looks at the pitches, all of these end up to be behind, so you have to end up pushing them to the left a little bit. And so that for me was a much faster way than getting on manuscript paper or to try and draw in the notes in real time, which would have just been a mess. So it was kind of an automated way to do that. And then I just saved the MIDI track and I pulled it in here, loaded up the same patch, and I made sure that when I recorded those, I set them to not be tempo synced. This is why the MIDI names say phrases Latin tempo synced, and then it says 90 beats per minute. Because if I import this into a project and I don't import the time signature, these notes down here that I recorded are not going to line up. So that's pretty much how I put this together here. And I have some strings and choir and harp here, just some other light orchestration there. And then I have one more example here that I wanted to show you. And this is just maybe another idea that I threw together. So let's check this out. So obviously that's not in the traditional style that you would associate with a library like this, but you can create some really cool kind of lead lines with it and rhythmic textures there. A lot of different stuff you can do. Thanks so much for checking out this tutorial. I hope that the things that we talked about will help you in your music productions and your music creating journey. Again, my name is Dave Bode for Tuts Plus. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you around.